Sudan is a country in the middle of Africa, bordered by countries like Egypt, Ethiopia, and Chad. Today, we're going into a topic that has been making headlines, but might not be fully understood. So, grab a seat. Let's break it down. Over the last months, the great conflict between military groups in Sudan has reached what most say is a grim turning point. At the moment, the country's future is even more livid. There have been reports of war crimes, massacres, mass displacement, and a worsening humanitarian crisis reported during the over 1 year conflict in Sudan. And many experts are now asking if the country is on the brink of becoming a failed state or being split apart. Even the UN Security Council agreed to end its special integrated transitional assistance mission in Sudan, also known as UNITAMS. Why? The Sudanese government requested that the mission end because it was failing to meet expectations. Let's have a brief history on UNITAMS. The mission was established in 2020 with the aim of supporting the transition into democracy in Sudan after a combination of military pressure and civilian protests succeeded in putting an end to the rule of the country's long-running dictator, al-Bashir. But then again, instead of moving toward democracy, it's pretty obvious that Sudan seems to be moving towards even more destruction and violence. Several representatives agreed on a resolution during one closed-door Security Council meeting at the UN headquarters in New York to terminate the UNITAMS mandate. Not just that, it was finally concluded during the meeting that there will be a 3-month transitional period during which UNITAMS, which offers employment to over 300 people, will end its mission in Sudan. As you know, most UN bodies operate at the pleasure of host governments, and they have faced more hostility in African nations recently, especially in countries such as Mali and Gabon, which have recently undergone coups. But then again, the United Nations still has other agencies operating in Sudan. The major military groups inside Sudan have been fighting each other since April 2023. They are the Sudanese Armed Forces, or SAF, and the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. SAF has over 300,000 personnel and is headed by Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. You could say that it works like a regular army. The RSF, on the other hand, is estimated to have 80 to 100,000 personnel and is controlled by Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, better known as Hemeti. Looking at the number of personnel on each group, you could say the SAF has more equipment, including tanks, helicopters, and an air force. But in terms of battle hardened, it is not up to the level of the RSF. The forces may be relatively equal in terms of ability because so far, neither has managed to overpower the other. This has resulted to what the German Institute for International and Security Affairs called a strategic stalemate. Some experts say that the fact RSF and SAF are equally strong is a result of how they were formed. The past dictator known as al-Bashir first created the RSF in 2013 as a counterbalance to the SAF to ensure that the military never got too strong to challenge his rule and also launch a coup if need be. But then, the RSF evolved from the notorious Janjaweed militias in Darfur, which were formed by fighters and Arab tribes in that area. One of the Janjaweed's main objectives was the targeting of non-Arabs in Darfur, and this has continued. Hagar Ali, a researcher at the German Institute for Global and Area Studies, GIGA, stated that the current situation is unprecedented. According to him, there are two military organisations that are fairly evenly matched, with no platform or interface between them for negotiations. Ali, who has published extensively on Sudan, also revealed that when it comes to peace building and the negotiations, there's not much of a playbook for this particular constellation. After al-Bashir's regime came to an end, the military agreed to share power with civilians until real elections could be conducted, which was in August 2019. But in late 2021, any transition made towards democracy came to an end when the Sudanese military took control of the country in a coup. It also included both the SAF and the RSF. Negotiations were happening to figure out how to share power in Sudan among different groups, including civilian parties. But it was really tough because the military was pretty much keeping civilian groups out of politics, according to Ali. In March, there was a proposal to merge one of the military groups, RSF, with its nemesis, SAF. This made tensions between the military groups even worse. RSF's leader, Hemeti, reportedly wanted more political power, which added to the problem. Back in late 2022, there was a basic agreement signed by all military groups and over 40 civilian groups to guide Sudan towards becoming more democratic. As a matter of fact, they were supposed to finalise it by mid-April. However, the situation for people in Sudan got really bad. Human rights organisations reported serious crimes committed by RSF, like murder, rape and arson. Just as they have previously, the RSF also targeted non-Arabs in Darfur, and in particular, they were targeting certain communities, like the Masalit tribe, and forcing them to leave their homes. In November 2023, hundreds of civilians were killed in fighting, and thousands had to flee to Chad for safety. We're talking of an estimate of 800 to 2,000 people, mainly civilians, being killed in fighting. A further 8,000 were displaced. At the moment, there are over 500,000 Sudanese in Chad who were displaced by the previous fighting. Will Carter, a Sudan country director for the Norwegian Refugee Council, told the press mid-December during an online conference held by the Washington-based Center for International and Strategic Studies that this has become the largest displacement crisis on the continent, at least, and possibly in the world. It's a bleak situation, Carter said, and to be honest, we're bracing for it to get worse next year. Famine is not off the table. There are some of the worst types of atrocities being committed and very little to contain them, and a collapsing state, making healthcare, education systems, but also even basic banking unlikely, he added. The numbers are huge, funds are low, and operational capacity for aid providers is low, Carter concluded. Since the fighting got worse, the number of people needing help in Sudan has gone up a lot. Previously, there was an estimate of 15.8 million people in need of humanitarian assistance. Now, there are also close to 25 million people who need humanitarian assistance. The humanitarian impacts are the number one reason to worry about this, Mortley Earl, a research fellow at Giga, told DW. It's going to overwhelm a country like Chad, and it will affect the broader region too. Some experts think Sudan might split into two separate sides because of the fighting. Others think the fighting could keep going like it has in Libya, with different groups controlling different parts of the country. Neither RSF nor SAF wants to back down and make peace, which makes it hard to reach a new agreement. Each group wants to keep their power and control over resources. According to Ali, one of the really big things will be decisive is each party's capacity to govern and to mobilise local people in their favour. That is where the two sides are not evenly matched. Ali also noted, the SAF has most of the government structure with it, which is located in the base of Port Sudan. Another factor that play a core role are economics, and it will depend on who will finally be able to access Sudan's most important resources. At the moment, the RSF controls important territory. Nobody really knows what will happen next, Ali said. Going back to the kind of power-sharing peace deal that existed in the past seems unclear. Why? It would force both the RSF and SAF to make too many sacrifices, and both parties may lose personal power and wealth. If the country doesn't come up with a good plan, the internal conflict Sudan has been dealing with between different ethnic groups and rebel factions may rise, and there could be more violence, displacement, and a whole lot of suffering for the people living there. Sudan has been facing food shortages and famine, especially in rural areas. This is partly due to the conflicts disrupting agriculture and food distribution, but also because of factors like drought and economic instability. This instability makes it hard for the government to address the country's problems effectively, leaving many people feeling frustrated and hopeless. So, to sum it up, Sudan's struggling because of a combination of these factors. It's a tough situation, but there's hope that with international support and efforts from within Sudan, things can start to improve. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Remember, awareness is the first step towards change. Let's keep Sudan in our thoughts and continue to learn more about how we can help. Take care and see you next time.